involve minor breaches of discipline. These incidents frequently originate in the classroom situation itself and are within the control of the teacher. Disciplinary problems in the classroom are symptoms of underlying weaknesses in total learning situation.
Welcome to Did You Know? The ESCO HVAC Show. We will see you in about 45 seconds or so. Make sure that you are subscribing to our channels, our LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook. Turn on notifications, and we are very excited to be here with you. It's almost time, about 30 more seconds. Make sure to grab your notebook and pen so you can jot down notes along the way, because at the end of the show, you could have an opportunity to ask our guests questions so we can dive a little deeper into these topics. And here we go. Welcome to Did You Know? The ESCO HVAC Show. Well, thank you everyone for joining Did You Know? The ESCO HVAC Show. I sincerely apologize for not having a class for us last week. We had all intentions. Eugene and Howard and I were down at the AHR Expo, and signal just wasn't quite good enough to do a high-def broadcast. So we did do a podcast video, and so it's on the channel. So if you haven't had a chance, check that out. We had some great panelists for it. So we've spent a lot of time talking about changes in technology in our industry and new technologies for the classrooms, right? Well, a lot of the comments that we've been getting from wonderful feedback, and we encourage you to give us some of the feedback, is what about the classrooms? What can we do to be better in our classrooms? Is there much information out there? Because we've seen a lot of shifts in our classrooms. And man, have we got a panel of guests today. Eugene, Jason, Ty, thank you so much for joining us. So let's do just a little bit of background in here. So when we talk about the classroom and how to manage classrooms, so I got recruited into teaching. Eugene, you got conned into teaching. Jason, you got encouraged to get into teaching. Ty, what about you? What brought you into education?
Actually, I had a good friend of mine says you're always talking about HVAC every time we go anywhere. And there's this position open at the school, so we go check it out. And I went after work, and they said, hey, we want to hire you. And they said, here's some paperwork. They walked me into a classroom, put the book in my face, and said, hey, good luck. And and I was on my own from there.
All right, so this is a perfect segue. So this is exactly what I was going to ask. So how many of us were technicians before we became teachers? All right. And at what point of that educator onboarding process did you get the classroom management class? Right? Still. Well, that's why we're here, right? So that's what we're going to talk about today, is we're going to talk about some of the primary things that we have seen in the classrooms that we are just not always educated on. And there's a variety of things that we can dive into. These are going to be our top 3 that we're going to spend with today. And there are a couple others that we probably ought to dive into deeper, which we'll do at a later point. Now, I do want to tell everyone that a lot of these topics we are covering at the National HVACR Education Conference in Vegas, which we'll dive into a little deeper in a bit. So enjoy the topics. Let us know where you're chiming in from. Hop in the chat. Tell us who you are, what part of the country, what part of the world. And if you're into education, what part of education are you at? Because we all have a variety of different backgrounds. I spent most of my education in the distributor side. Eugene, how about you?
Community college, high school, proprietary schools. So I've taught high school, post-secondary, public schools, private schools. So pretty much.
So you've seen a variety. Exactly. Jason, how about yourself?
It was a private school. For the most part, I was a contractor for many years, and then teacher and director of education at a for-profit school.
Nice. Ty, how about you?
Was a technician primarily first, and then I was teaching at several for-profit schools across the country in multiple states. I've also taught for manufacturers and manufacturing training and on-the-job field training and supply house training. and I've also been director of education over the program in a couple of different schools. So I've seen a
You've
few
been
things,
around.
something going on.
You've seen a few things. That's why I was hoping you'd be on here with us, because we represent a variety of different aspects of the industry. But the one thing that we can all relate to is that the direction in the classroom is not something that we have a lot of experience in. Ty, you brought up something that gets mentioned to us so often, that when we go from the field into the classroom, we have the technical skills. Now we have to hone our personal skills. So one of the personal skills that gets brought up to us, and how do we properly handle that, is the generational gap. And people ask, well, is it the same for all learners? And in some ways it is, but in many aspects it's not. And we'll also cover some disruptive students and how to handle phones in the classroom. That's probably been our biggest comment section that we've had here recently. So if we look at the different generations of learners, we really do have 6 different generations of learners on a daily basis. And people say, man, what about some of our older folks, our builders, the 71 plus? Are they really still in the education and learning side? Absolutely. We've just had discussions in the last couple of weeks with some of our own friends of the industry, that like Tom Tebby. Tom Tebby is just now getting into doing audio video recording for his church so he can do services at church. Completely new learning skill for him. We've had Harvey Kaplan starting his own YouTube channel this week. We have seen a variety of learning skills because people are staying into the industry longer. And we love it because that's the people that we've all learned from, right? So we go all the way down into this new generation of alpha. Along the way, we have learned a variety of different skills. So when you guys were in a classroom, did you have to cater your content to different generations differently?
Yes, for me, yes.
So what was your experiences with that, Ty? I mean, just pick on maybe a couple different generations. I mean, most of us here are kind of in that Generation X area where now we can look at generations, and we always blame the younger generations. Yeah, they're the worst. Every generation above us is blamed the one down below them, but now we got a couple of them that we can blame, right? Well, when we look at content, there's been a shift in our industry, and I hope people are aware of that we have progressed a little bit with our educational platforms. So if we look at, let's just focus on down through the Generation Z and the way education is perceived. And that is really what this is about, is how do we perceive education and how do we receive the information? If we start with our maturest, the primary communication media of that generation is formal letters. They did a lot of writing. We're talking about pre-electronics. So a lot of formal communication. As we move down the line, we have more uses of things like telephones. Most of us spend a lot of time with email and text messaging. As we get into the younger generations like Y, now we're doing a lot of social media, which is why we're broadcasting on social media streams right now, right? We're streaming to multiple platforms because our audiences are now listening in different places. Then when we get into our Gen Zs, man, now we're really getting into the electronic communications, almost an addiction to the communication devices, right? Well, how do we handle that in the classrooms? So the important part is knowing that we have educational differences in our generations. If we look at just content delivery alone, I started my journey looking into educational content a few years ago and started looking at why our students have this inrush of information. Is it just electronics, or is it in content and in the way that we perceive content, the delivery? So I simply started looking at math books over a few generations, right? So if we look at, say, math books for our current students, even on the front cover, they have a lot of information to absorb, right? A lot of things, but it also directs them into certain paths. So on the front cover, they look at that and go, okay, am I interested in this or not? Can I get this in pieces? Do I need to learn the whole thing? And if we look back in time a little bit, we've seen some changes through that. Our graphics have changed a lot. The content has not really changed. It's the presentation, the way we present the content. Now, this is a really good depictorial from Brian Mathers of some transitions in education in the last couple of decades. Many of us, which we typically think of like the first 3 generations of learners, learn in a very linear path. Now, see if this resonates with you guys. Did you learn by sequence of operation?
Yes.
Right? Makes sense. If you think about our literature, the way that we learn from books, in almost all of the manuals and books that we grew up with, we learned in a linear progression, just like a sequence of operation in a mechanical piece of equipment. We started with a component, and the output of that went into the input of the next, and the output of that went into the input of the next, and the output of that went into the input of the next. So even if it was a book and we were reading a book, we didn't know the ending of the book until we got to the end of the book. And we learned in a linear path along the way. So that was the delivery that we used for a long time. When technology started changing in the 80s and 90s and we started getting more into a nonlinear, which is what we would call modular learning, the information has not really changed. If I take a math book, well, yeah, we've had some changes in the way we do math, but at the core of that math book, it's still the essential principles, right? Same way with our HVAC, refrigeration, electrical equipment, it's still the same functions. The difference is many of our younger learners are now learning at school in a non-linear or modular platform. They're still getting to the end, but they may not be learning the exact same progression that seems normal to us. So for them, it's important to be able to get to the end, absolutely, but how they get there may look different than you and I. So the thing that I always bring up is, do we want to be right or do we want to be effective? Because what is right? Is it right to us? Is it right to the next generations? Each of these generations may have a different understanding of what right would look like. So what has been your guys' perspective on the changes in content in the classrooms over the couple decades? Have you seen any significant changes? Ty, I know you look into education and generations quite a bit. Give me some of your personal perspectives on it.
Oh man, there's so much out there, and one of the things I'm finding is when you get people interested and you build on curiosity, and then you can lead them to where you want to go, it's effective through all the generations.
Isn't it though?
Yes, we're a product of our environment. So
Absolutely.
we've had to learn to go through these steps to get to where we need to go. And the newer generations, they want to where they're curious, where their mind's at. And I
Yes.
found that that's really effective, for even people that are older than me. Hey, you get their curiosity, and then they're asking questions. You can lead them to where you want them to go, and that's great when you see that they're asking you the questions and they're already wanting to go there. Well, hey, let's go there. For example, when I do blowers, we have these blowers lined up in the class, and we say, hey, we're going to start pulling these blowers apart. And they said, well, you hadn't taught us how. Okay, this is the task we're going to do. And now some of them are frustrated, some of them are mad, some of them are figuring it out on their own, and some of them are just, I can't do this. And so I said, okay, now let's go back and let's talk about it. So we talk about some of the steps, and now let's go back and apply those. It's just, these little pieces. Wow, that made it so much easier. Now they have an appreciation for this, and then I can't remember everything. Is there step by step? Well, here I have this step by step guide. You can go through all these steps.
Let me show you.
And it's a huge effect on it. So now we're giving them the linears that shows them how to actually use it. If you do this step before that step, you have a better outcome. And it's a really a fun way of doing it for all the generations.
But it's so
I
funny,
like it.
Clifton. It's so funny because I had an aunt growing up, and whenever she read a book, she would always read the last chapter first.
Really?
She always wanted to see how it ended, and then
Exactly.
she would backtrack. And we see our students doing that now.
Exactly.
They wanna get to the end, and then they will piece together what they need to get the understanding of where they feel they need to be. So the level of understanding and comprehension is really going to vary from individual to individual, because some people want that deeper level of understanding, and there are
That's right.
other people that just want to know just enough.
Fundamentals. That's
And
right.
even the way a lot of our schools right now are organized. When I was in school and when I was teaching at a proprietary school,
Mm-hmm.
students had to take class 1, then they took class 2, 3,
Progressive
4,
linear.
5, 6. Now you see a lot of schools that have the, we call the record player
That's right.
mentality, where they can hop on anywhere on level
Anytime
1,
they
take
want.
any of the classes, and then once
Yes.
they finish all of those courses on level 1, they move to level 2. So they might take basic electricity before they take basic refrigeration. They might take soft skills before. So even the way programs are organized right now, it's not the same as
Nope.
when I went to school or when I started my teaching career.
I struggle with that. I don't know about you guys, but when I first started diving into linear versus modular education, it made no sense to me whatsoever. I'm a sequence of operation guy.
Yep.
I start from a point and I can work forward or I can move backward, but by golly, I'm going to get to where I need to go when I'm done. And so I have been trained for a linear progression. So I was diving into this. This was about 2 years ago. I sat down with our teenage stepdaughters, threw out a story, right? Okay, so we have this scenario, and to get to this scenario, I'm going to start from here, and I'm going to learn piece A, piece B, C, D, E, F, and G, and at the end, I'm going to solve this mystery. And at that time, a 13-year-old looks at me and goes, "Why did it take you so long to get to the end?" And I went, "Wait a minute, hold on a minute." And then the 16-year-old says, "That's one of the dumbest things I've ever heard." Well, did you learn that's how you get from point A to point B? I was like, "Yeah, you didn't." And they said, no, we get there, but how we get there is our choice because we have different kinds of content. Maybe I want to do some e-learning content that will catch me ahead of the program so that I know. And so, Jason, tell us a little bit about some of the e-modules that you've been creating to go along with the actual physical content.
Well, just to get things started, Clifton, getting into the classroom portion of it, the content over the years of teaching hasn't changed. The content is the content. We have new technologies, right? What has changed is the delivery platform.
Yeah, that's right.
When I first started teaching, it was a chalkboard, then a dry erase board. Then I graduated to PowerPoint, which was something spectacular and took a lot of learning. And we started making videos and showing videos. And so, I mean, while the content hasn't changed, the delivery method has changed. How we present to today's learners. And a lot of today's learners are very, as you mentioned, comfortable with the electronics. So if we put together something in an e-learning module, modular, as you said, and internet-based, it's a lot more in their realm, if you will. They're at home with this type of a learning management system. So we've put together a lot of e-learning courses. We have our e-learning network. And most of the titles that, ESCO publishes, we have in some form of an e-learning course or a digital version of it. We also have interactive e-learning courses like the heat pump program or some of the Pro Cup things that we have put up on our website. We have a couple more that are scheduled to come out. The A2L will be out soon. So again, we're reaching the learners where they are now.
That's right.
The content hasn't changed. It's just a delivery method to reach them. Where are they at? We have to go to where they are.
Exactly. And maybe they are very interested in doing the e-learning content. What if you have a student that's very curious about learning the process of heat pumps before they get to that hands-on class? What is the biggest complaint that we have from all of the instructors? They don't have enough hands-on lab time, right? That's always our biggest complaint. So what if we get more of those principles to those students and allow them to learn at their own pace and their own platform? They may come to class and have already invested themselves in many hours of learning before they actually get to school because they enjoy the platforms.
Too. Right. You'll be surprised when they start asking questions that, how did you get to that? I was on the e-learning course last night. I read chapters 6, 7, 8, and 9, and holy cow.
This is fascinating. Show me how it does this.
There's that motivation that Ty talked about. Pique their curiosity.
Pique that curiosity.
Well, more and more teachers are actually strong. They were recommended, but now they're strongly encouraging their students to actively participate and engage in these other options external to the class before the teacher actually speaks about it in class.
Sure.
So back in the day when I was teaching at the high school, at the college preparatory school, my students would always wait until I gave a lesson and then they would read the book.
Exactly.
And my my response to them was, well, when you're home reading the book, you can't ask me questions. So the better prepared you are prior to walking into class, the more likely you are to have an intelligent question that's going to help you solidify that content in your brain. So it's a preemptive approach. That's definitely the way of the world right now, where students are walking into a classroom before they meet face to face with their teacher. They've already been exposed to the content.
Exactly.
So by the time they're hearing it from the teacher is just there to dot the I's and cross the T's.
Yep. bring in that personal level of experience. And we do have a shortage of educators in our industry. Our entire industry has shortages. So why not give the students an opportunity to be invested into the content before they even get to the class and before they get to the hands-on?
They have to be a willing participant in their education. It's up to us as instructors to educate them, but them as a student, they have just as much invested in this as we do. They have to be just as willing to learn as we are to teach.
But Jason, we have it easier. One of my relatives, she's a freshman comm teacher at UMass in Amherst, Massachusetts.
Sure.
And students take her class not because they want to take her class. Freshman composition is required, whatever your major is.
Mm-hmm.
So she makes it very clear on the first day. She's like, I know you don't want to be here, but you're here.
You're here.
So
take advantage
with
of
us, with HVAC, that's really not the case because people choose HVAC. We're not a required course to become an English major. We are the destination. We are where our students are with us because they chose to be with us, because they want a career in HVAC. So it's a much easier sell for us to have our students take that initiative, again, to surround themselves and immerse themselves in this content before they walk into class, much more than the freshman composition teachers.
Exactly. So that's a great segue into our next item of discussion. So we know that we have different types of media, so we have to really dive into what our content delivery is, what we're best at, and look at the options that we can provide for our educators or for our students. So what about when we get into the conflict with our students on, let's keep the phones to the side because we're going to come to that one here in a minute. That's a big topic. Just conduct in general. So I would always say that a very good starting point for educators is to understand exactly what your policy on conduct is for your school. Because a lot of us, as we are technicians, come into the classroom, we're going to try to treat our students as what? Maybe like we treat other children, young people that we've been around before, and it can be a very different sequence of operation when we're dealing with conduct of students. So in my personal experiences, I don't have a ton of good education on this. Most of mine were contractors that were working for employers, and it was very simple. You act up in class, you're out of here, and you're going to have consequences to deal with from your own employer. But what about on the educational side? Any of you guys want to dive in a little bit into just some general conduct for disciplinary actions for our students?
I'll hop on first because when you mentioned it at the beginning of the show, when we became teachers, we really didn't get a lot of training on classroom management. So a lot of what I learned as far as classroom management came from me, running into a brick wall when things went crazy in the classroom, and doing a lot of research on my own. How do we deal with certain situations?
Yeah.
And what I did, I was teaching in proprietary schools and high schools, but then I moved on to college where we are required to prepare a syllabus for our course.
Mm-hmm.
And I was doing a lot of research on disruptive behavior and issues in the classroom. And what I learned was a lot of what we call disruptive behavior in the classroom, we as teachers really have control over. Because student frustration, disruptive behavior is a function of either frustration, stress, personal issues that
secondary emotion
might be having. So what we need to do as educators, if we have the opportunity to prepare a syllabus, is really, really outline what is acceptable behavior in our classrooms.
Yep.
So in my syllabus, for example, in all of my classes, there was one specific item that says, in my class, one person speaks at a time. Now, sometimes that's going to be me, and sometimes that's going to be someone else. And if two students, for example, decide they need to have a sidebar conversation, or one student decides to get loud, I simply stop speaking. And then it only takes one time. Students be like, "Oh, professor,
Sure.
why did you stop speaking?" I'm like, "Well, if you look at my syllabus, it says one person speaks at a time."
Sure.
And
I'm feeling
because
my obligation.
yeah, and because Mr. Jones feels the need to babble, you know, I'm respecting my course outline, and when he finishes rambling, then I will continue speaking. And and what happens is you actually have your students policing themselves.
Sure.
So I'm the good guy. I don't have to deal with that. Or if somebody is disruptive, you know, you know, Mr. Murphy, if you look at your syllabus, disruptive behavior is not acceptable in my class. And when you exhibit these behaviors, I simply stop teaching. And then if this continues, I will ask you to leave the room. And if they refuse to leave the room, I refuse to teach. It's in my
Absolutely.
outline. It's
Yeah.
in my course outline. It says, if you do this, this is what I will do. And the students who want to learn, they will say, well, professor told you to get out.
It's very clear.
So I don't have to discipline my students. They do it and
On their
themselves.
own.
They know if they do this,
Hmm.
they're going to do this. And I think I'm going to give one more point and then I'll turn it over.
Sure.
But I never make a student problem a class problem.
Right.
So I'll address the student, but I won't penalize the classroom. I won't penalize the entire group. And if I do have a student leave, I'll be like, please come back tomorrow and we'll try this again. But when that student leaves, I never bring it up again. I don't talk about that student when they leave, because what if another student gets asked to leave another day? Oh, then they know, oh, well, he's going to talk about me when I leave.
Exactly. It creates a
the
level
student
of
leaves-
professionalism.
Yeah, when that student leaves, you get right back into your lesson. And again, you need to treat every class like an intellectual endeavor.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't want to get drawn down. You don't want to get caught up in a shouting argument. You don't want to get caught up in a debate. You always need to maintain your decorum. You can be consistent, all the time. You can be understanding, but you need to be firm. You need to set the rules, and you have to stick
to them.
The rules.
Absolutely.
Well, those are the obviously you never want to yell, you never want to hit a student. That never ends well.
Many big consequences for that.
Absolutely.
Well, Ty and Jason, what about when we're talking about the syllabus and the guidelines? What about posting the rules and the expectations very clearly in your classrooms?
Well, I do mine a little different. When I first started out, we had to go through the syllabus the first day, and you spend all this time going over the syllabus, and they've already done this 2 or 3 times already. They know that it's a blow-off class, and half the time you end up with students not even showing up the first day because it's a waste of their time.
Sure.
Talking about that linear thing again. And so what we started doing, I said, hey, we're going to start this class off. I have your basic rules. You guys know what the rules are. These are my rules. This is what we're going to have happen. These are the lines we don't cross. I want this to be welcoming. We're going to have fun. We're going to learn a lot of information. But I have 2 things I want to add. Some days I'm having a bad day because I'm a human. And when I'm having a bad day, I'm going to let you guys know. And
right.
on those
Up front.
days, don't push my buttons. It's not going to go well. I said, I try to keep those at a minimum, but sometimes it happens. Has anybody had a bad day? And there's, people say yes. And I said, the second thing is if you're having a bad day, give me a heads up before class. You don't have to tell me any details at all. Just let me know that you're having a bad day, and I'm going to give you as much room as you need. And we're going to start off with, I'm going to have respect for each one of you, and you'll have respect for me. And then from that point, you can build on that respect, or you can act from that respect. And the choice is entirely yours. And the first week, I am pretty rigid. So everybody knows, hey, don't mess with time. And then after that, we start having a lot more
fun.
Softening
up a little bit.
Yes. And then they realize they know what the rules are. They know where to don't cross the lines.
Yeah.
And then
here's my boundaries.
Yes.
Yes.
And there's always things that happen. But the other thing is I never send the student to the office. I handle everything in the classroom because I have control in the classroom. And most of the time it's not you. They're having an issue at home, at work, with 1,000 other things in their life. And it comes out right there because you're the person. They can learn all this information anywhere, online, reading in books. The information's there. They come because it's you, whether it's industrial training or the manufacturer training. They come because they want to see you, the person, somebody they can see, somebody they can relate to and talk to.
So true. So
treating that person with respect will give you a lot farther. And I've had to kick somebody out of class. I say, look, I'm getting frustrated. You're already frustrated. This isn't going to work. So you're going to have to leave. but we'll talk about it later. Go cool off. We'll talk about it later. Am I out of school? No, you're not out of school. I just need you to leave the class. If they don't want to leave, I said, hey, not a problem. The rest of the class, we're going to go to lab, and then, we'll defuse the situation. And then like Eugene said, we don't talk about the student. We don't talk about why. And then I reach out to the student. Hey, let's talk. What's really going on? Just you and me,
Sure.
no audience. And man,
what's
can
the
really
primary emotion that caused the secondary emotion?
The stories that I've gotten from. I had one student throw his desk over. Like, I mean, he,
Right.
very disruptive. Like, hey, later on we talked about it, and the stories that he told me just broke my heart. And then he's like, I can't go back in that classroom. I said, yes, you are. You're going to walk back in that classroom like nothing happened, because we've settled between you and me. That's what people do. And then tomorrow we rolled back in, and he ended up being a straight A student in the class after that point.
Jason, I always wondered what your classrooms are like. You're a very straight to the point kind of guy. Tell me a little bit about handling conduct scenarios in your classrooms.
Well, like both of these guys have already mentioned, we have a policy. We post it, go over it, that sort of thing. I used to have a bend don't break type of rule where if things were starting to, as Ty mentioned, okay, this guy's having a problem, this guy's having an issue. Again, in the proprietary school that we were at, we had large age. I had some students that were 18 and some that were 68.
Wow.
So there was,
so you've seen multiple generations, absolutely.
In the same classroom. And when I explain something, this percentage may get it and the other percentage doesn't. And when they're raising their hand asking questions, this group is, what's wrong with you? How did you not, okay, let's calm down. You guys get it? Let's take a walk over here. I'll give these guys a project and let me spend some more time with you guys. So effectively, I would have to divvy them up, separate them, so to speak, and give them different projects to work on or different assignments to work on while I'd address each individual's concerns. Again, the bend, don't break type thing. I'm not going to kick you out. I'm not going to fail you. We're going to get through this. We're going to find out what it is that's causing your issue. A lot of times it just came down to, well, the rest of the class got it, but I didn't. And I don't want to say anything because I don't want to look stupid.
I don't want to stand out. That's right.
Right. I don't want to raise my hand to keep saying, can you explain that again? Because the rest of the class is going to get mad. Right. So there's some frustration that builds up. And you can get to the bottom of that again, as we mentioned, by dealing with that student one-on-one. And the student's problem doesn't become the classroom's problem.
And a lot of the issues really are diffusable by the teacher.
Right.
And the responsibility of the teacher to diffuse.
Yeah, students get frustrated. Sometimes it's out of boredom. Sometimes it's the way the teacher is teaching or not teaching. So it's really the teacher's job to keep his or her students interested, engaged. It's important that teachers learn their students' names. And at the beginning of a semester, I would always do a sit down with each student. Even if it was 5 minutes, just chatting with them.
Yeah.
What are you looking to get out of this class? And once you've established that relationship with a student, they're less likely to push back. They're less likely to exhibit disruptive behavior. So once you really become approachable and you've made that connection with the students, with Jason and Ty, we've all had it where we've had students for different classes. So once we've had a student before and we have them again, you're less likely to have these issues.
Exactly.
So it's really about outlining expectations and addressing them before problems arise. And this way, when something happens, like Ty said, I had a problem with a student, and before I was able to reach out to the student came to my office to apologize and explain what went on. I got mad one time at a student because he was falling asleep in my class, and I singled him out. It was a learning experience for me. What I didn't know was he got stuck at work. He had to work a double. He literally got out of work at 6 o'clock in the morning and was still in class at 8 when we started. He was shot. I assumed he was falling asleep, which I saw at that time as a sign of disrespect to me. But he just worked 16 hours straight at work.
And then came to school.
When somebody's exhibiting this behavior, you need to, again, give them the benefit of the doubt. And that's a big thing. I say, listen, if that happens again, do me a favor, just sit in the back of the room. I appreciate you being here. And if you're really, tired, just sit in the back of them. Don't sit in the front row. Sure. So then it becomes less of a distraction. It's kind of what Ty said. If you're having a bad day, I'll work with you. Just don't create an atmosphere that's not conducive to learning for the rest of the students.
Good stuff,
One of the
guys.
things, Clifton, I would bring up is one way to prevent problems like this is to promote camaraderie among the class, where they all get along, They become friends. You're getting people from different backgrounds, different age groups, different generations. Well, in the setting that I taught in, and you want them to get along. And when this is over, when this program is done, and they grow up and go out into the world, so to speak, they have lasting friendships that they made throughout this.
And communication skills.
So, as Eugene mentioned, one of the things that he used, get to know their name. Well, what I used to do was on the first day of class, I have a Polaroid camera. I would line the students up and take a Polaroid of each one of these, and I would write their name on the bottom, and I would pin it on the wall.
Yep.
So that not just me, but the rest of the students can go up there and learn each other's names.
Yeah.
And then on the last day, when you graduated, I would give you your Polaroid, and you could look at yourself. Wow, look at how I looked back then. It's a real good closing moment. But
why did I shave and clean myself up? What happened this year?
Right. It's one of those things where, again, if you promote that within the classroom, you're less likely to have instances like we're seeing here.
Exactly. Such good content, guys. We really appreciate you diving into this, because so many of our educators, both the ones that are experienced, that are out there laughing, going, yeah, I've been through that. The young educators, like many of us, who are sitting in the classroom going, man, how am I supposed to learn this? And then the experienced technicians that are out in the field that are thinking about going into the education. These are the things that you need to know before you get there, so it's not as much of a surprise. And we spent a lot of time here at the ESCO Institute in HVAC Excellence preparing materials so that you can be an effective educator. One of those is becoming an effective trainer by our very own Eugene Silverstein. Woo-hoo. And so we build these resources to make sure that you have everything you need to be a highly impactful educator. So anyone have any questions before we dive into the last one, which is the one that we really get a lot of topics on, a lot of comments on, is how do we get rid of or how do we use electronic devices in the classroom? So I've seen a few people chime in. Donald from Winnipeg, thanks for joining us. I see you a lot out here, Donald. We really appreciate you being here. Anyone have any questions, any comments before we dive a little bit further? Okay, so, one other one. Man, I cannot forget this one. So, everyone here that you see is going to be at the National HVACR Education Conference in Las Vegas, Nevada, here in, 5 weeks or so? I mean, it's like right around the corner. Oh, and check that out. If you want to learn more about the conference, use your phone. If you're watching from a PC, take a screenshot. That QR code will send you right to our conference details so you can see what's going on. We have over 60 different classrooms, many of which are how to be a better presenter, how to be a better educator, how to communicate better with your students. So a lot of opportunities to learn, not just the technical side of educating, but the classroom side that we, have to learn.
Jump in on that just
Hop in there, Ty.
When I was teaching, I was just completely overwhelmed with learning
first
stuff.
year.
But I got through that first year, and that was a great experience. But it wasn't until I had gone to the HVAC Educators Conference, and I used my only week of vacation. I used all of my savings to go to that, as a lot of people do. Which I think that schools should be paying for their own education.
Oh, absolutely.
That's another topic. But that's the point.
Another show.
Really changed me. That was where everything about my education changed, because I get to see there's a whole bunch of other people in the same boat that I was in that was struggling with the same things I was in. And I learned a massive new stuff that I thought that I knew I had down. I learned so many other things in there, and I was just overwhelmed with the information, but also the how to teach new generations and the contacts that I made, the people that I made, somebody I knew that I could call on and say, hey, I'm having trouble with this. And now I have several instructors that I mentor that I'm able to give them that information back. But it all changed from the HVAC Educators Conference. That was the point where I become somebody that was making it through teaching to actually stepping into that professional side. It was, for me,
it's
really
game-changing.
Huge. Game-changing.
2019. First time participant.
I had that same experience. When I showed up to the conference, I found out, listen, I'm not alone.
Yeah.
There's this huge group of people doing the same thing I'm doing, and they're having the same
feeling the same pains.
Right. And we're working together, exchanging ideas. It was a great place to network. Your exact experience is the exact same experience I had.
Yeah, this is going to be a crazy conference this year. When the conference kicked off in 2007, we had a little bit over 300 people. I wasn't a member of the ESCO team at that point, but there were a little bit over 300 people. I've been at this conference every year since it started.
Yeah.
This year, we already have our highest number of registrants, and we still have 31 days until the conference.
Yeah, it's going to be so cool.
Awesome.
I'm looking forward to it. And there'll be classes from everyone here. So we highly encourage you to join us. If you want to come sit down and have coffee or have a beer with one of us, that's what we're there for, is just to sit down and learn to be better together. We encourage you to learn a little bit more about the conference and everything that it has to offer. So what about the whole smartphone deal? How do we handle that big scenario? And man, what a change that has brought to our educational environment. The thing that we have to understand the most is we have to accept technology. Technology is what is really progressing a lot of our education, and it needs to be understood for its value, but it also needs to be understood for its time to be removed from the environment. And that's what many of our educators are struggling with, is how to address phones and what to do with them in the classroom. So let's just think about this for a second. Why are they there to begin with? I mean, we can't solve something unless we know the intent, right?
It can be a tool or it can be a distraction.
It can be. So what's our role in that entire process?
Manage it.
Manage it and remove the distraction and utilize the tools. That's where we have to look at it. So why are they using phones, right? 65% of Gen Zs are on their smartphones after midnight, a few nights a week even. 55% of Gen Zs have 5 or plus hours a day. So some would call it an addiction. Some would call it a use of a tool, right? And I'll be the first one to say that I use my smart devices a lot more than I would probably want to admit. And I try to use them for tools. So are they using them for the right reasons or the wrong reasons? Well, it depends on the actual application. So if we look at this study, this was done by, let's see, I think this one was CNBC. So they took a poll. 50% of students are believed to be addicted to their phones, which means they have a chemical response to the action that is created by it, right? Well, we know that excitement creates endorphins. We all want to be part of something. We all want to be recognized. We all want to be involved. And so when that text message comes through, it's an immediate trigger for a chemical reaction, okay? So now we have to look at how that is managed. Here's the interesting part of all this in the exact same survey. 54% of children felt that their parents check their phones too often. So it is guilty. It's not just a generation of students. It's an entire culture that is going through a shift in electronic devices. Now, what can we do about that? There are some drastic measures out there. There's a school in Texas that's already implemented in all of their trades classes a mandatory locked phone requirement when you get into class. You cannot have that phone the entire time that you're in any of the shop classes. We see mobile lockers, which is not a bad idea if you're completely removing the device from the classroom. So what is the happy blend in that? Well, for me, it is a blend. It's the using the tool for the tool and removing the distraction when it is a distraction. So this is a great opportunity for all of us to give some perspectives on ways that we've been successful. I will tell you that in my personal experiences, I like to use tools with the smartphones. So I would do things like Kahoot and do surveys in the middle of class to encourage our students to respond. But when it is in actual lab time, there are no phones to be used in the lab unless they are directly connected to smart diagnostic tools, which are part of the lab experience itself. So ways that we can control that phone usage. You need to be very clear in understanding what your school policy is on phones. So a lot of times as educators, we get bullied into the corner because why? We just didn't know. We come into teaching a class and a lot of administration has that perception that if you are a teacher, you have been through a lot of formal education on handling classrooms and maintaining presentations, and that we would be already adapted to understanding how to utilize and to limit phone usage in our classrooms. Not necessarily so. A lot of this, we have to learn and be very specific on it and then utilize it in our class times. So, are there good times to use smartphones? And go.
I just want to throw something out there real quick. So, unlike Ty and Jason, I have 30 years in front of the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
So when I started teaching back in the caveman days, my mentality about cell phones was all cell phones off. I don't want to see them under any circumstances. I see your cell phone, you're leaving the classroom.
Immediately, yes.
Yeah, and that was 30 years ago.
Right.
So that was in the early 90s when I started teaching.
Yep.
But then we started seeing these apps. Pressure temperature
Tools.
charts are on the apps. Psychrometric charts are on the apps. So there were so many troubleshooting apps tying into your wireless instrumentation now, where you can connect pressure sensors to your system, and you're monitoring those pressures. So I actually saw a really neat renaissance of my own mentality, my own growth from, I don't want to see your phones. They need to be off. If your phone rings, I'm going to shoot you.
Yeah.
To, yeah, take your phones out and open this app and let's see what this system is doing.
That's a big change.
Oh, yeah. So it really, so like Ty said, it's all about managing. So, yeah, when we're working or when we're speaking in class, yeah, I don't want to see your phones. And there will be times, okay, listen, let's open up this app, because there were some apps that I required my students to have on their phones. And yeah, I said, listen, there is a time for phones. When I'm lecturing to you about the operation of a thermostatic expansion valve, that's not phone time.
Nope.
And it's actually pretty interesting because I think Ty, Jason, Howard, me, a lot of people from our team have been in classes when I've presented at AHR or other events. And I always start out my session and say, well, I have to make one comment about this. And they're like, oh, yeah, what am I going to say?
Right.
Oh, you're going to say to put our phones away.
You're right.
I'm like, no, actually, I'd really like you to put your phone on silent, but I'd really like you to keep it out.
Yes.
And I say, we're only together for 90 minutes. If I can't keep your attention for 90 minutes and you feel the need to answer emails,
to distract yourself,
surf the internet, that means I'm not doing my job. So please keep your phones out. And if I see you surfing the net or texting, then I know that I'm not doing my job.
Wow,
So
there's an interesting philosophy.
I actually use this as a feedback device, and I'm telling people,
you too, Ty.
keep it out. Keep the phone out.
Yeah.
If you're using it for reasons other than what I'm asking you to do, then that's on me. My job as an educator, I have 3 things I need to do as an educator. People say, oh, you need to educate. But I need also, before I can educate you, I need to engage you and entertain you. If I can engage you and entertain you, then and only then can I educate you. So if I'm not doing those things and you're on this, that's on me. That's not on you.
I'm going to get some emails on that, I'll guarantee you.
I'm that same way.
But I believe that.
I want my students having their phones out, and not just. I go a little farther on even in labs. I want your phones out. I want you taking pictures of what you're seeing.
Give them something to do with it.
I want you taking selfies in your lab. I want you spreading. I want you to show how cool the school is, how cool the learning is. I want you to share that with your friends, and I want you to be proud of what you're doing, and that's more that's coming back to us. And then I have them set up Snapchats and the whatever group that they want, so everybody can communicate together. So if somebody's missing a day or they don't understand something, they can ask questions amongst each other.
A lifeblood within themselves.
Yes. And they're
cool?
used. That's their digital world. They're used to that just as much as you and me are walking up and doing a handshake.
That's
them
exactly
communicating from anywhere. So if they're missing a day, I don't have to gather up all the information. They're already doing it. They're already self-educating, and they all ask questions together, and they'll all work together. You have that leader of the class that's naturally there. But I let them use that. I let them spread it to social media, and I let them use all those things. And if they want to check text messages or emails or all that kind of stuff, as long as they're not disrupting somebody else, like they have to have, if they're watching a movie and there's noise on, that's a respect.
Now
that's
it's getting
respect,
serious.
not for me, but also for your classmates.
Sure.
Those are some of those lines that we cross. But I want them to have it out. And if I say everybody's on their phone, I know, hey, I need to mix it up. Let's go to lab.
Just do
And they
something
don't have
different
enough time to, get
to
distracted
comprehend.
because I'm mixing it up constantly.
There you go.
They used to say if it was more than 30 minutes, and it was like, well, if it's longer than 15 minutes. Well, now with TikTok, they're like 3 minutes the maximum video, and now YouTube's 1 minute. They got these
That's
YouTube
right.
shorts that are 1 minute.
It's 1 minute long.
And I do education on those apps because that's where the people are. I want to get them interested. There's a lot of bad information out there, and it's a pain trying to get a concept in 1 minute. But it challenges me to keep growing outside of my comfort zones. So I embrace the phones. And just like Eugene said, I use it as a tool to register me. If I see everybody's on their phones, it's not their fault. I need to get their interest back. Because even if they're forcing themselves to watch me and they're not on their phone, they're still not learning anything. So it's a great way to gauge what's really happening. Hey, I'm starting to lose them. I'm starting to check their text messages.
Right.
Okay, let's go to the lab. Let's walk around the building. I've done classes before. We were lecturing. I was talking as we were literally walking around the building and outside of the building, walking around while I'm talking. I had a whiteboard. I'm drawing stuff and, take a picture of this. Whatever it takes to keep them, engaged. That's what it's about.
So Tyler's telling everybody. So Ty's telling everybody to take selfies. So
that's right, in front of a piece of equipment. So I actually talked to a guy last year when I was at the conference. We were talking about using technology. He said, "You know what I do with my students?" He says, as part of their final, they have to take a short video and they have to add to text the description of what is happening with that piece of equipment of that video that I had them take. So he has them take a video of something happening on a piece of equipment. Maybe it's, a flame rollout has been, unwired and and they can't see it or wired. They've done some kind of a fault on a piece of equipment. Take a video of this situation and then text in it what is actually happening and create a short video of the actual issue. And you get it right if you solve what that video was telling you. So that's an interesting take. I mean, it's using technology to interact with the classroom and causing that student to now go home and interact with the content that they learned in the classroom. They're going to go home and play on their phone. Why not give them something instructive out of the classroom from that? Another tool to work with.
I used to do something a little different in the classroom. I used to... they have to have their phones, and they would have to go in the lab, and they would say, "All right, what are we doing today, Mr. O? What are we doing in the lab?" And I'd say, "Well, I sent you all a link.
That's right.
Have at it." And the link would be a private YouTube link where it's me doing the lab that they're just about to do, giving them instructions in 3 to 5 minutes, and they would have to watch that video. Say, okay, we're supposed to test this compressor. We're supposed to do this. And they can go back to that video to see where I'm putting the meter leads and where I'm doing things. And everything was in that little and I would set these up so I can use them over and over with future classes, these links, and keep them private.
Absolutely.
And I would send it out and say, all right, we're doing this lab today. What's the instructions? They're in the link on the phone I sent you on your phone. They would open it up and there'd be that little 3 to 5 minute video. And again, it's instructional. They're seeing where I'm putting it.
That's right.
That's awesome. And just really talking about the generational changes.
Yeah.
We have a member of our team over at ESCO, Lem Palmer, and he always, talks about when he was in the classroom, he was subbing one time, and he gave the students an exercise. And what he had 8 compressors around the room, each one with a different fault. So his intent was to have the students working in small groups, each on a compressor, and then move from station to station to station and troubleshoot each of the problems.
Okay.
And what these students actually did, because the instructions were troubleshoot, find out what the problem is with each of these compressors. So the groups went to each of the compressors, and then once they finished on one station, they all went out into the hallway and they were texting each other what was wrong with all of the other compressors. The instructions were find out what's wrong with each of the compressors. Well, they're being very creative because I found out what's wrong with compressor 2 by asking Jason, hey, you just worked on compressor 2, what's wrong with it? Then I say, Ty, what's wrong with compressor 3? You just worked on that one. So each of the little groups worked on one compressor, and then they shared information with each other to get the results for all the other compressors. So So Lem is saying I couldn't get mad at them. They did what I asked them.
They did what was
do.
asked.
They used technology. They used their heads. They used their brains to effectively accomplish what their teacher asked
share,
them.
learn. It's such a huge tool. I don't do this test anymore, so I'm okay telling my secret behind it. I used to have a 100-question HVAC technician assessment. So I would go to a contractor and say, hey, let me test all of your technicians, every single one of them, from the youngest guy to the most experienced, with a 100-question test. And let's see how good your technicians are and compare. Because everyone says, I'm the best technician. I'm a super tech. I'm great tech. Let's just see real quick who's the best technician. So they all had the ability to find the answers to these questions, right? Now, it was almost impossible to get 100. Some of them you would have to be, you'd have to be a Eugene to get that high, right? You'd have to know the engineering side and the technical side and the delivery side. But in that, it was a very specific design, is for you in the delivery of the question, use all of your resources to get through this assessment in 60 minutes. You have 100 questions and go. And you know who complained about the unfairness of this test? Guys that are our age. You know who guys that aced it as close as they possibly could get? That was younger generations. So when the technicians would come back and they would complain about, hey, well, this is an unfair test. I said, no, it's a very fair test. You had all sorts of tools around you. You had iPads, you had your own personal phones, you had your technician. I never told you this was an open or closed book test. I didn't give you any resources. I told you that you needed to solve this with all the available information that you had. And the younger students didn't even hesitate. They picked up on that and boom, the phones were out and they found the equations. They did the calculations themselves. They used the calculators to finish in the equations. They would find bits and pieces of information later in other questions so they can come back and plug them into the equations and have the exact details so that they could solve very sophisticated, arithmetic calculations based on information that they could retrieve and was already in other questions. So the tools really come into play to creating an educational experience when used correctly. Yeah.
I would say that today's generation, the younger generations, the digital generation, if you will, if we had a fan law that we were discussing, and Eugene could spout 50 different fan laws probably right now. But if you asked another generation, do you know this formula? No, but I know where I can find it.
I'll get it real quick. Give me a second.
Yes, I will have it. And they know how to, if I were to Google something, if I were to ask Uncle Google, hey, I would have to go through all these results and try, they would know how to put it in exactly where they get the best result. And it's always on top. And again, they can come with it right away. Whereas I'm scrolling through and no, that's not right. No, that doesn't look right. They didn't memorize the formula, but they know exactly where to find it.
Exactly. And what does it come down to? It's finding the answers as quick as possible, right? And understanding what it means. Now, that takes time, but that whole development of modular education shows how quickly our younger generations can get to answers when they have the tools that they are comfortable with. I know I'm going to have some nasty emails off from this one. I know that. But then I'm also going to have people going, you know what? I've never thought about that before. Because Eugene, you're so right. If you think back about at the time frame when for you, it was an absolute no phones in the class. Your perception of that reality was that you were right. That's the way that you understood it. Another generation would look at that and go, that is not right at all. So the important part is that we are effective and that we look at other generations and understand that they may learn differently than us. They still need to consume the same content. They may just enjoy consuming it in slightly different manners than what we are accustomed to.
But it's also important to be an effective instructor that you need to be able to change with the times. Well, right now, if I was in the classroom and I still had that mentality, all phones off all the time, don't want to see them, I think my students would be missing out on opportunities to use technologies and to grow with the industry.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there are probably some of our colleagues who still are no cell phones, but I think
no technology
population is shrinking.
I do too. And I've gotten some very heated discussions on this. And, my answer is Go teach your technician everything that you believe in fundamentally. And then they're going to go out and learn from somebody else how to proceed from there.
Right, how do they want to apply it, right?
Exactly.
I just want to say one other thing, Clifton. You know, for the most part, we've been attributing a lot of our discussion today to teachers in the classroom. But whether you're a tech out in the field and you have a helper working with you, whether you're a service manager talking to your tech, we're all teachers in some way, shape, or form.
Absolutely.
The vast majority of us are tasked with conveying information to either colleagues or subordinates or other people that we work with. Sometimes it's educating consumers, our customers, how a piece of equipment operates. So a lot of what we were talking about today, in a lot of ways, is not only teacher-student, classroom students, but we're all educators, we're all instructors, we're all teachers, we're all counselors. We're all out there to disseminate information, like I said, whether it's to a helper, a colleague, a customer. So a lot of what we're talking about really, really, permeates into our everyday lives.
Every day.
Think about our relationships with customers. If we have a customer who's frustrated or stressed, we deal with air conditioning system failures every day. It's what we do.
Right.
But when a customer's air conditioning system fails, for them, it's a life-changing, it's devastating.
Yeah.
They have to take off from work. How are they going to get their kids to school? How are they going to? So their lives have been turned upside down. It's our job to understand their frustration, to be understanding, but also be firm. A lot of what we were just talking about handling disruptive behavior in a classroom.
Sure.
At work, we deal with that too.
The exact same scenario.
So the skills that we're learning really are not only teacher-student, instructor, trainee. It really, really permeates into everything we do. Just wanted to throw that out there.
Man, if I would have had this education when I was 20 years old, I would have paid for this stuff. We're giving it for free. Oh, man. Such amazing conversations from the exact people to have here today. Any other comments from the audience? We still have quite a few people out there hanging out, so we're obviously keeping some people entertained. We're doing our job to be effective today. Yeah, we're geeks. Yeah, on that feed, yeah, you are one of those. So we actually are broadcasting out on we're actually 6 different feeds right now. So depending on where you're joining in from YouTube, Facebook, from our webpage, from LinkedIn, Twitter. I think Twitter would be the last one. So, all right. Well, Ty, Jason, Eugene, any final comments dive into here?
I think it's important to make sure that you keep caring. That's the one thing. Once you stop caring, it's time to take a vacation or retire. You got to keep learning. Same thing applies. There's so much new information out there, refrigerants and laws and equipment. So you got to keep learning and caring. Just understanding the other side of what's happening to somebody. So learning, caring. If you got those two things, everything else is solvable. But there's so many people out there who want to help. There's several groups. There's the ESCO team here. I mean, they're amazing people. I remember the first time I got to meet Eugene. It was amazing. This is the author of the books that I went to his class. Like, wow, he's even better in person. And now to be able to text him and talk to him, and he's a great guy. And there's so many I got to know Jason and you over the time, and there's so many people behind the scenes of ESCO that are great people. But there's also thousands of instructors out there that are also have the same issues or have advice. So reach out to people. People reach out to me. Help as many people as I can. And if you're there, reach out to other people that are new instructors. Want to learn. I post stuff on LinkedIn. Let's help each other. Let's make everybody's job easier.
It's our village. We keep saying that this is the village. Every one of us has our own parts. And the better we work together, the better we all prosper.
Awesome.
Cool. All right. Well, I think that's going to be a wrap for the day. We appreciate all of you joining us, especially Ty for coming in today and diving into classroom content. And hopefully we'll see you all at the National HVACR Education Conference in Las Vegas, March 20th through the 22nd, 2023. And if not, we will see you next week on Did You Know? The ESCO HVAC Show.
Thank you for joining Did You Know, the ESCO HVAC Show, brought to you by the ESCO Institute in HVAC Excellence. Our mission is to bring the top educators of the industry here for you in a live, unique experience so that you can join us from multiple social platforms, all with the opportunity to ask questions, to be involved, and to learn about the things that are changing in our industry as they are changing. Subscribe to our YouTube channel to get notifications when we go live every week. Are you an educator looking for resources to be the best that you can be? Man, you're in the right place. And we invite you to come join us at the National HVACR Education Conference, where we bring all of these guests and many more, along with manufacturers and different organizations of the trade, so that we can all be in one place at one time and gather this information to make us better together. How do you learn more? Go to escogroup.org, select HVAC Excellence, and then the conference. I look forward to seeing you again next week on Did You Know, the ESCO HVAC Show.